All right, is it happening? Yes, it is. I'm live. It's the Nazarite, bringing you Hebrew lore from days of yore, from Yerushalayim. So I want to start with. I think it might be a short one, but I know that sometimes when I say a short one, it ends up being very, very long. Regardless, I want to say it. An encounter I had on the bus a few days ago. I may have mentioned this, probably not, and a couple of comments based on the last video or the one before that. So I was on the bus the other day and someone out of the blue, right, with a Haredi or ultra Orthodox sort of getup, if you will. Hey, hello, Paula, Robert. And he turns to me and he asks me, "Are you a Nazarite?" And I say, "Yes, I am." And he responded positively. Now, for reference, only a handful, literally a few, three or four people, have ever turned to me and asked me if I'm a Nazarite. Maybe less than four. I don't know. The point is that out of the, let's say, four people, including this guy on the bus, out of the four, three of them, if I'm not mistaken, like the bulk of them, they responded in a kind of negative way. And people are very, very much into the no, no, the Nazarite vow is not allowed, and vows and oaths are not allowed. And if they give me a chance to speak up and, let's say, defend my position on vows and oaths, I say, well, if you take a vow or an oath and it's something, hello, Karen. If you take a vow or an oath and it's something that is a lie, it is something you're doing out of, let's say, negative reasons for negative outcome. I'm not, if you say something which you know is a lie, things like that, especially if it's an oath, which is to tell the truth, it's not encouraged. And so many times, and this also appears in Ecclesiastes in Kohelet, where he says it's better that you don't vow than make a vow and not keep it. And so it's been sort of passed down through tradition or kind of warped tradition that vows and oaths are a bad thing and ought to be avoided, when the truth is that they ought to be taken lightly, for sure, with all seriousness and due consideration and all of that. But it's not that you need to avoid them, and this is also evident from the Tanakh itself. Now, different stories about vows and oaths are not exactly encouraging, things like Yiftach's daughter in Judges, but nevertheless, I, for one, was hoping when I took this vow that it wasn't in pride and ego. And so this guy responded positively, and we spoke a few minutes, and then we parted ways. And it was, I think, maybe one of the first times that an Orthodox Torah keeping Jew responded positively. At first of all, simply out of the blue, asked me, and this guy didn't know who the Rastafari were. So I told him, yeah, I told him, you're probably the only one who's ever turned to me, and there weren't many who didn't think I was a Rasta. But I can understand why people might think I'm a Rasta, obviously. It was a nice interaction. I saw it as a good omen. I can't explain why, but the fact that this guy took the news of someone being a Nazarite in a favorable sort of way, I saw that as a good thing. And you could say, nah, it's just a meaningless encounter, but these things don't usually happen. Nobody ever just turns to me out of the blue and asks. It means that this guy saw me, saw the hair, I had a bandana on, and so he figured it was a head covering. I wonder, had I not had a head covering, if he would have asked me anyway. Since he doesn't know who the Rastas are, it stands to reason that he would. And it's not to toot my own horn. I just loved that tiny little interaction, a chance encounter, if you will, although I don't believe in chance, but a random encounter on the bus, which I saw as a good omen. And, well, I basically wanted to send that out into the world. It was a nice little short interaction with a fellow, Torah keeper, presumably. He was dressed like one, and while that does not immediately mean that he is, he had the get up, as I said. And right, he had the side curls, he had the beard, right, an ultra orthodox guy. And I don't like the term ultra orthodox. I don't believe there's such a thing as ultra orthodox, but let's leave that aside as well. All right, I want to read a couple of comments. So, hello to you two. Hi, Paula or Robert and Karen. So, the Nazarene Nazarite said he said, I want to say I made, oh, wait, I'm sorry. Right. He says that I mentioned Rechavam in the previous, well, Rechavam in the made-up holiday, and he says that the evil he had done, that's what Rechavam wait, Rechavam? No, Yovam. Sorry, pardon me. Not Rechavam, son of Solomon. Yovam, son of Nevat, the first king of the kingdom of Israel. So he erected two golden calves, and he made up a holiday 1 month after Sukkot. And the idea was that the kingdom of Israel won't need to go to the temple because they have altars, right, bamot, and they had the golden calves for worship, and the holiday which he made up, which he sort of conjured from his heart. And he says, Seth here says, now this idea of the evil that Yerovam has done, he said that he's going to make a Facebook post on how this applies to both Judaism and Christianity today, particularly Christianity, he says, but I don't think Judaism is off the hook either. And someone else hit me up, I think it was Yodidiao on the chat, and he spoke of how people with beards and side curls and yarmulkes and tassels, right, that they're kind of playing, wait, that they're kind of, am I in the frame? Yeah, that they're kind of pretending, and that it's not a good thing, and that it's all external, something along those lines. And I said, well, at one point I had a beard and side curls and a yarmulke. I wore the tassels, I wore tefillin, phylacteries, and I never felt that it was an issue of pride and of standing out, because he said that they stand out for the sake of standing out. And I disagree. I mean, sure, there must be people who simply are like that on the outside and not on the inside. A lot of people are not precisely how they present themselves. We all have personas, right? We all have different ways in which we communicate and express ourselves in the world and the worlds. And sometimes that includes donning a kind of mask or persona or right something like that for various reasons. It's all about psychology, which I know little about. But I said I don't agree that simply because it makes a person stand out, man or woman, that it's inherently like wrong and not kosher. And he likened it to a pig, right? That it's hooves, right? Well, it's yeah, hooves. They have the kosher signs, but the inside is non-kosher, right? And which is why pig isn't kosher. And there are different interpretations on why that is and what it is. The whole idea with pig is disputed. Not that it's not kosher, but why it's not kosher aside from the actual what's called simanim, those things, right? It was a chewing its cud, and having the split hoof, and and what is it? I don't remember it in English, right? Anyway, the three signs. Hello, Binky. The three signs that make an animal kosher for eating. The pig has only one, but not the other, and inside, outside. And I told him I don't exactly agree that just because it makes a person stand out, it necessarily means that they're doing it for the wrong reasons. There is, and it says this in the Talmud, if I'm not mistaken, that a Talmid Chacham, right, a scholar, right, he needs to have 1/60th of pride. And I've mentioned this before, that pride and ego can serve. They have a lot of utility if you know how to channel them. Far be it from me to know how it's done. I'm still working, I'm still trying to work with my own ego and bringing it out there and not, and speaking it so its sting is less, is lessened, if not deadened. All right, let's go to the chat quickly, see if there's anything there. Okay. Paula says, did you tell him about your channel? No, I didn't actually. I didn't. There are many, I didn't ascertain this, but many Haredim, ultra-Orthodox folk, they don't have smartphones, or they have smartphones which don't have YouTube, or what's called a kosher phone. And so it didn't come up. It didn't come up, and I didn't bring it up. Karen says, the servant of Abraham relied on signs, omens, to find a bride for Isaac. Right. He actually turns to God and asks for a sign. I was just thinking about this yesterday, probably because it was in the Torah portion for the week. Right. It was in Toldot. So yeah, makes sense. This idea of turning and looking for an omen, he asks for the sake of Avraham, his master, which is an interesting thing. It's also said that Avraham, when he made his servant swear the oath that he'll go and find a bride, and if she doesn't want to come, he should just drop the whole thing, that the oath that he took was on the covenant of circumcision which Abraham had performed. Interesting. So Karen says, I think, oh, so it was, I think, and he even prayed to God that the woman who showed the sign be the one. It made me think more about signs and omens. So the deal with signs and omens, according to halacha and the Torah, is that you shouldn't say, "Oh, there's a cloud in the sky," or "An animal crossed my path," or "My bread fell from my hand." This must mean X, Y, and Z. You're not supposed to sort of guess at what is to come. You're not supposed to let the way of the world stop you from doing what it is you ought to be doing. And I think this, look, it also pertains to foreign worship, idol worship, things of that nature, where they used the different elements and they used the ways of the world, as it were, in order to perform these rituals or well, and things of that nature. Now, I don't have anything precisely against Wiccans, pagans, like modern day. I don't know what it was back then. I don't know exactly what it is now. I know only a little bit. But signs and omens, it's it's a kind of double-edged sword. On the one hand, it could very well be that you should pay heed to what goes on in the world and draw conclusions for yourself based on what you're experiencing. On the other hand, you shouldn't put too much stock into right, a cloud, an animal, or something falling, because then it would cause you. I think it would cause you to start doubting every move, and then you feel like you need to consult someone who knows, and only under certain conditions were people or the king or the Sanhedrin allowed to call upon the Lord, right, with the high priest and the breastplate and the different, right, of the choshen and the different stones, right, with the ephod. Now, wow, this is more halacha. In the Torah, we see, and in the Tanakh, we see that people do ask for signs. People do ask for omens. Kings or prophets, or well, those who they were prophesying for and to, it's something that I think is, well, you know what? I guess we all make our own decisions and choices on what emphasis, what sort of emphasis we put on signs and omens, whether or not to ask for them, whether or not to consider everyday things, seemingly everyday things, to be signs and omens. And the reason why I say I saw that as a good omen, it was simply a good feeling, and that had a positive charge to it. It was the beginning of the day, and so I said, it's going to be a good day. I have a feeling about it, seeing as how this positive interaction took place, and it was about something which I've never experienced before, and I am a sucker for first times. And this certainly was a first time that someone out of the blue asked me if that's what I am, and then actually finds it favorable, right, in their eyes. So again, we spoke a few minutes. It was interesting. It's always nice to meet someone who is not aware that Nazarites still are around. So it was really interesting. So Paula or Robert says the Pharisees sect was looked upon in the New Testament as people that did things as approval of man, not approval of God. He really doesn't mention any other sect doing that except them. The Purushim. This brings into question the divinity, or some say so-called divinity, of the oral traditions, of the oral Torah. While I don't doubt that there was an oral tradition that came down, passed down, some of it before Sinai, some of it at Sinai, some of it, maybe most of it, after Sinai, I think that over the course of all of history and everything that had befallen, right, the Hebrew people, it's difficult. The chain, some people want to say, the chain of tradition, of rabbinic tradition, is unbroken. And this is how we know it's the true Torah and the true oral Torah. It's difficult for me to believe, not that it wasn't broken. Maybe it wasn't broken, but it was certainly influenced. If you take somebody who lived at the time of the first temple, biblical times, the second temple, maybe the second temple Jews, right, would see a lot of commonalities with modern day Jewry. But anything, I think, before the Second Temple era, and you're looking at a whole other, I mean, it's the same God, but different rituals. It's the same, let's say, people, but different customs. And certainly, we see in the everyday prayers of Orthodox rabbinic prayers that some of them were instituted way back at the time of Moses and Joshua, and some of them were instituted at the time of the Second Temple, and some were instituted for 200 years ago. Some were instituted in the national religious, right, Dati Le'umi, crowd, which are Zionists, there are prayers from the establishing of the state of Israel. Now, I'm taking the prayer book as a kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Well, as an example, and it to some degree it does say something about the way that the Jewish Orthodox people conduct themselves nowadays. It's a mixture of so many different epochs, eras, people, places, customs, traditions, and even now in Israel, there are so many different groups and sects, right, hailing from all kinds of different locations. They have their own traditions, their own Torah scrolls, their own way of reading the Torah scrolls, all kinds of different prayers, those leaning more towards Hasidism and Kabbalah, those leaning more towards, well, it's all based on Kabbalah, but I digress. It doesn't mention any other sect doing that. Well, I don't remember the New Testament. I only read it once, but I know that in the Talmud, in the Mishnah, certain sects are spoken of in a kind of, I don't know if pejorative, but not in a favorable way, in a kind of negative way. And I can understand that because the Pushim and the rabbinics, right, the sages of the Second Temple, the Orthodox ones. There was no Orthodox then, but you get my meaning. I think they were very fearful, and rightly so, that things will be lost completely, which is also why when Rabbi Yochanan, when Caesar or the centurion, whoever it was, the leader in charge, when he told him he'll grant him a wish or a city, he didn't say Jerusalem. He said, "Give me Yavne and its sages," and he knew what he was doing. After that destruction, or about around the time of that destruction, and up until recently, we were all Hebrew people in survival mode. It's very difficult to sustain this path without a temple, this way without the city, the land, the Sabbath of the land. And so going into survival mode means that it's not the bare minimum, but considering the fact that most of the Torah is about the temple and the worship, and we don't have that, it is the minimum, kind of. I mean, there were people, I think, who had the influence, that same influence that Moses had. They were in their generation as Moses in his generation, as Joshua in his generation, as Samuel in his, who had knowledge, who had wisdom, who had lore. Does that mean it should apply to everyone in the form of halacha? They said yes. The high court said yes. We made these rulings, and now we're just gonna ride it out until there's a temple. Because the rule is in halacha that if the Sanhedrin made a kind of decree, you are not allowed to break it, change it, modify it, right? Without the power, that same power, and that power was indeed broken. And I've mentioned that before as well. Paula says standing out. Yes, that's what he called it. He called it standing out. Karen says one could argue that dreams are signs or omens. Right, so dreams, and I've mentioned this before, and we've mentioned it before, right? That I know that the Ramchal in his book Derech Hashem, right, Derech Adonai, he says that certain dreams you can tell that there's a kind of thread from the individual's psyche or subconscious or unconscious, whatever it is, from the individual's psyche. There's a kind of thread that is the tiniest and thinnest, let's say, metaphysical thread through which revelation can come and sort of filter down into the dreaming mind, which is why there's a certain fast that if you have a recurring bad dream, there's a certain fast that you can opt to do and a certain prayer that goes with it while the priests are blessing the people. And there's, well, dreams are mentioned obviously in the Torah, right, with Jacob and the ladder and Joseph, and later on in the Tanakh, and up to very recently, all the time. Dreams are, I don't know enough about dreams, and we said we'll maybe have a dialogue. I'd like to do that. But yes, one could argue that dreams are signs or omens, which is why there is in tractate Brachot, Masechet Brachot of the Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud, I think it's Brachot, in one of the later chapters, there is a lot there that deals with what if a person sees this in a dream or that in a dream, what does it mean? Because it's symbolic, but it has meaning, and if you don't know how to interpret it, then here's like a guideline, and it's not all there. There are many other things that were joined later in different tractates and different midrashim or whatnot. But Masechet Brachot of the Gemara has a lot about the dreams. If you see this, it means this. If you see that, it means that. And even that does not mean to say that that's it. It's like a deterministic thing, and that's it. It's been predetermined, and that's what's going to happen, right? Free will, free choice, action, action. We can shape our own destiny and mold it. Um, some say you can, some say you can't. I'm of camp. Yes, you can. I really am. I have to be, I think. So she says, Mazel tov, may it be under a good sign, inshallah. I think it is human nature to look for signs. Definitely it is. But there is always a line that takes it too far, which can be said about anything. Yes, it could, which I think it's why the Torah said, don't listen to those who watch the clouds. Don't listen to those who speak through the dead, through corpses' bones. Don't listen to those who conjure up souls and dead ones. Listen to prophets, right? Listen to the sages, the people, the priests, the ones who carry on the Torah and who deliver the word. Listen to them. Paula says, I definitely had signs in my life that I knew it was the Most High answering my prayer. I also had same type of deal. Same type of deal. And while you could make the argument that, yes, we're only seeing what we want to see, okay, I don't mind. I don't mind seeing what I want to see if I'm aiming at the right thing, hopefully at the righteous thing, the good thing, the just thing. And that's not all I do, of course. I fail many times repeatedly on the daily, but I think if you're looking for a sign, you're going to find it. And so it could go either way, right? It can be anything, like you said. Paula said, I bet that guy told some of his friends, dude, I met a Nazarite today. Could be. Could be. I think it's a very great thing, not because I'm great, just because the idea of the Nazarite vow is so great that mentioning it and speaking of it, let alone trying to go in that path, I think it's a great thing. And I'll leave it at that. You people know what I think of the Nazarite vow if you've followed this channel for a while. Hey! Hello, Father. I remember when you dreamt I croaked. Remember? No, I don't remember. I don't remember that. I'm sure you're right, but no, I don't remember. But now that you mention it, it does make a whole lot of sense. So right, so death, right, is much like in the tarot cards, I think, right? It's transformation. It's what's it called? Um, come on, another word for transformation, but that's more poignant. Hey, Hebrew Nazarite. Hello, Nazarene Nazarite. Seth, do you still have your old channel? So I don't think so. I think he said he was locked out, or well, he'll answer. I think I'm gonna say goodbye. Was there anything else? Hold on, there was another comment. I think there was another comment. Right. So Nazarene Nazarite asked, are Esau's descendants considered descendants of Abraham? Are they considered descendants of Abraham? I mean, in a straight line, it's Abraham, Isaac, Esau. And in that sense, yes, they are descendants of Abraham, much like all of the other boys and girls that he had with Keturah are descendants of Abraham. But the covenant of Abraham is a different story. Now, any human being, I think, can approach and take on the covenant of Abraham, right? Man or woman, it's a different sort of covenant, but it's the covenant of Abraham, of the one God, right? And of going forth into the land that God shows us. That idea of going at it alone, being a Hebrew, right? The idea of that covenant. You don't have to be, as I've said before, in order to be a Hebrew man or woman. You don't have to be a descendant of right of Jewish descendants or anything of the sort. You need to take on that covenant, do what you need to do, mikvah, and you're a Hebrew person. So are they considered descendants of Abraham? And little Andre said, of course, why not? Why would you think they're not? So if you want to answer him either here or in the comment. Um, and Seth continued and said, oh, and this I'm seeing only now. I didn't see it before. I guess maybe YouTube didn't show it to me. All right. So the last brother was made first and the first last. So right, you're talking about Yaakov and Esav, I'm assuming, right? Jacob and Esau. Right, and I spoke about the pot of food and about the firstborn, right? Duties, responsibilities, and the covenant, and again passing that on. Yeah, and little Andre replied, "That's how Elohim always works." Yes, I would love to live in that world where there is no separation, where we are able to come together again And I'm not doing enough to bring that about. And I said that the last time I mentioned such words, right? That such words came out of my mouth. I'm also separating myself, and I'm also segregating myself in some ways, right? But calling myself a Hebrew, whatever that may be, and in doing so, I'm kind of setting myself apart in a multitude of ways. But I do yearn, I guess, and long for a time when where the sibling rivalry will be solved and done with, when we can come together as that one human family. Lord knows how. Lord knows, I have no idea. But I think it's important that that happens, hopefully through peace and love and not through war and atrocities. Leil Menucha, says my father. Good night, good night. Paula says, I read that there have been 49 volcanoes go off in October, just saying 71 in total this year. Oh, wow. I hope nobody was hurt, although chances are some people were hurt. All right. Oh, you know what? Let's not end it on a volcano erupting and hurting people. Let's just say, a volcano erupting. Let's give thanks for nature. Even though it's completely wild and untamed, we are part of it. We're not separate from it. We are definitely part of it. I was listening today for the last few days to Alan Watts and Ram Dass, and it's so. Anytime I listen to those two, not together, right? Different lectures and speeches and talks and Q and A's, and there's such wisdom there. I would love it if I could incorporate some more of those teachings into my life in a positive way, in a life affirming and a self development kind of way. Okay, let's end on that. May we all have people to learn from, dead or alive. May we learn to keep this covenant, to keep the Torah, to keep commandments. May we have good first times, whether we are Hebrew or not, right? I mean, with the Torah and commandments. And may we merit that time when we are able to come together in peace and love somehow and break down the barriers and tear down those walls and accept ourselves as that one human family, right? As part of nature. God willing. It sounds totally fantastic and undoable, but I have hope. Laila Tov. Let's have a good one. I'll see you, God willing, Friday.